Hello, welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. A new Russia-aligned government has been sworn in Bulgaria, and it will be led by former President Rumen Radev, who resigned in January this year. The former president of Bulgaria has now been sworn in as the new prime minister and won an absolute majority for his party, Progressive Bulgaria. What does this new government mean for Bulgaria, one of the poorest countries in the EU that just took on the euro in January? I'm now joined by Ivan Vejvoda, senior researcher at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just begin by perhaps the first most basic question. Will Prime Minister Rumen Radev be able to maintain long-term political stability with a single-party majority government? After all, we've just seen 8 elections in 5 years for Bulgaria.
Well, as your report said, this is the first time in 3 decades that there's a single-party government in Bulgaria, and that bodes well for the stability of the government, given that it's one party. And in fact, this overwhelming victory of former President Radev and his Progressive Bulgaria party is the result of the instability that you just described of many elections in a short period of time, lower voter turnout as the elections went on. And finally, voters in Bulgaria were seeking someone who could produce some sense of certainty and stability and obviously address crucial economic questions about rising prices and the instability regarding the future. So I think that as things stand now on the domestic front, this should be a government that should run the full course of its tenure.
And now I wanted to talk about Rumen Radev, the new prime minister, former president. We know that he is Eurosceptic. He's rather Russia-aligned. He wants to establish a stable government. Tell us a little bit about him as a politician, how you think he might settle in and perhaps establish alliances in Europe, in the region, and perhaps in the EU.
Well, he comes from the military. He was a fighter pilot, the commander of the Bulgarian Air Force. He also had a time of training in the US after having trained in, I think, the Soviet Union to start with, during his education as a pilot. And as you said, he has shown propensity to try and be closer to Russia while not reneging. And I think that's important to point out. Nobody expects Bulgaria to leave the European Union or to try and leave NATO for that matter. He has been against sort of full military support to Ukraine. But again, there's, as some people have said, more a change in the rhetoric than in the substance that is to be expected from the foreign policy of Bulgaria. So I think he will try and show to those who voted for him that he will steer a course of stability and, I would say, prudence, maintaining relations with Russia, but not taking fully the Russian side, as I said, remaining a loyal member of the European Union. I don't expect him to be someone like Orban, who has just lost power after 16 years, to try and block European Union decisions or NATO decisions on support to Ukraine.
So Bulgaria is viewed as one of the poorest countries in the EU. It just adopted the euro in January the 1st. What do you view as the greatest fiscal challenges this country faces, and what do you think that Radev is expected to tackle as perhaps the country's number one priority or priorities, shall we say?
Well, I think that's exactly what the voters who elected him are expecting, that he brings some sort of benefit to their household budgets, to their pockets, given that prices have risen. He is, of course, known to have been, as president, against the introduction of the euro. To remind our viewers that Bulgaria joined up, obviously, the Schengen travel area of the European Union, but also the euro at the beginning of this year, which is a huge accomplishment because they needed to align many of their fiscal and other policies. Now, of course, squaring the circle of trying to avoid higher inflation, but also to control the budget, there's expectations of some analysts that the fiscal rules will be somewhat looser, if we can put it that way. We'll see how the European Union and the European Central Bank react to that. But all in all, I think that Radev will try and address those issues in the immediate future so that the voters can see that they have chosen right. What happens later on in the midterm, very difficult to say, given the whole crisis on energy and fuel that has occurred with what's happening with the American-Israeli attack on Iran. Hopefully there will be an agreement, and so prices will be stabilized. But I think the people in Bulgaria are looking for two things. One is stability in their household budgets, and secondly, stability in the country overall.
Of course, that makes absolute sense. But the new Prime Minister is keen to access EU funds. But obviously he's characterized as an EU skeptic. And how successful do you think that the new Bulgarian government will be in reducing inflation, carrying out obviously the necessary reforms? There are some challenges in the judiciary and the public administration. So how do you think that the new government will juggle both accessing those funds and also dealing with those reforms that I just mentioned in those two areas?
You're right to point out to the issue of the judiciary. That will be a crucial test, because unlocking those funds in the European Union that are supposed to go to Bulgaria but were blocked because there was not a sufficient drive for judicial reform, Supreme Judicial Council that appoints judges and especially prosecutors. So this government of Prime Minister Radev has to go toward those reforms. Will they do it? How quickly will they do it if they decide? Clearly, they need those funds, which are significant. So I think that Radev will go forward with those reforms. Will those reforms be only a sort of paying lip service? They will be voted in, but then the effects of those reforms will not lead to what is desired, putting in place truly independent judges and prosecutors. That is something that Brussels and everyone else will be following very carefully.
And obviously the region, the Central and Eastern European region, and obviously further east, there are plenty of security challenges. Do you think that the new government in Bulgaria will accelerate its military modernization and perhaps be encouraged to deepen its cooperation with NATO and the EU, especially in the areas of defense initiatives with this new government? Do you think that Radev will consider this to be one of his priorities?
I believe so. Bulgaria has a crucial position on the eastern flank of NATO and the European Union, on the Black Sea, neighboring, of course, Romania to the north and Turkey to the south, both NATO members. They have bases which are used by NATO. Obviously, with Russia's aggression and full-scale invasion of Ukraine, they maintain a posture which is loyal to NATO, and I don't believe that Radev will want to change that. He might use other language, but I don't think we will see in practice major changes to that effect. Probably we'll see whether they take on a new presence of more NATO soldiers. That is something to be seen. But at the moment, I think that is not where we will be seeing major changes. It's really, I think, on the domestic front that we have to see whether he is truly committed to anti-corruption, which is one of the themes that he won his election on, and obviously on prosecuting those who have abused the positions in power.
Okay, we'll wrap up our conversation right there. Ivan Vejvoda, Senior Researcher at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for World Talks. Thank you so much for being with us here on TVP World. And make sure that you jump onto our socials and leave us your thoughts and comments as well. Goodbye.